prudent manner, bearing all the clinical factors in mind. Now, without much ado, I will call upon the speaker, Dr. Sridharan, for the sessions. One word before I hand over the mic to him. Dr. Sridharan has been my colleague over the past 12 years at MS Ramaiah while we were working. An extremely dedicated academician and a very, very good teacher. His domain was genetics, and where none of us would ever dare enter into that particular field, basically because his presentations were so beautiful and so lucid. And we will always reserve this part of the topic as for Dr. Sridharan. So I request him to come over here on the stage and give his presentation.
Thank you. Welcome you all after the lunch. Hope I will keep you awake for some time. The topic, molecular diagnostics, advantages and fallacies. So there is a lot of, misconception about molecular diagnostics. Molecular term is used in so many contexts. So if you are imagining so many different aspects of that, I am going to restrict myself to molecular diagnostics which relates to DNA, RNA, not to any other molecules. So I will end up my talk with a few details which are coming up in the future. I will not give any details of that, but I will show you the slides which relate to that. So my topic will relate to only diagnostic using DNA or messenger RNA as a tool for diagnosis. Next slide. So if you go back to the milestones in the diagnostic methodologies that we have been using, so we can divide that into two aspects, one for infective diseases and other for the non-infective diseases. So in the infective diseases, from the Cox postulate time onwards and whatever new additions that we have added to that, the basic diagnostic tools have been revolving around this, establishing the pathogen in the lesion either by smears or by any other method, directly visualizing the pathogen there, or isolating the pathogen and identifying the pathogen from the specimen available, either any exudates or tissue or anything. And then later on added on was the antigen and antibody studies. So these antigen and antibody studies were not there in the Cox postulates as he pronounced at that time. But later on this was supposed to be the fifth postulate to be taken as an indicator for evidence towards an infection. Next slide. So similar to that, in non-infective diseases, we have seen that gross pathology, histopathology has been the cornerstone of diagnosis in the early days of medicine. So the developments in those lines is the histochemical analysis, biochemical changes in the system of the host, which leads to disease process, and identifying the disease process by identifying the changes. And later on we came to the era of understanding the immune status of the host and the changes in the immune status, and understanding the antigens and the antibodies related to that, how they link up to make a diagnosis of a particular disease. Next slide. So the emerging technique which has come into existence since late 80s, after the identification of DNA and establishing the basic structure and function of DNA from the Crick and Watts model of DNA onwards, there was some 20 years when this was not taken for any diagnostic methodology, but understanding the basics of DNA and the total function of DNA in relation to the human body was being worked out. So late 80s onwards, we have developed tools which are available for diagnostic methodologies dependent on this. So molecular biology techniques utilized DNA, RNA and enzymes that interact with nucleic acids to understand biology at a molecular level. So my basic talk will be revolving only around this. Next slide. So if you take the overall view of the host and the health and disease process, we were looking at the top area of the whole organ system, cells, intracellular up to the level of chromosomes earlier, and then later on we leapfrogged into the proteins which involve the antigen and the antibody studies. So now we are coming back to the central portion which is linked to the whole spectrum. So that is the messenger RNA or the gene or DNA. So what are the methodologies which are available to use this area for diagnostic tools? I will try to explain in some details. Yes. So the same thing, gene expression. What is the logic of doing this? So the whole body structure and function is dictated by the proteins, major proteins, and these proteins are translated using the messenger RNA at the level of the ribosome, which messenger RNA is coming up from a dictated information available in the DNA. So the DNA and RNA reflect what is going to be the protein, which is what is going to be the function or the structure of a whole system of a living being. So the whole logic depends on this. Next slide. So that is known as the central dogma of the molecular biology, and this is the oft-repeated dogma which we still not disproved as yet, but this is the logic for everything that we are doing nowadays in biology. So I need not describe this. So we see that the red molecule or the single-stranded structure is the messenger RNA, which is transcribed as per the information available from the double-stranded DNA nucleotide sequence. And from the messenger RNA at the level of the ribosome, we get the protein produced, translated from that. And this protein is involved in all the function and the structure. So here, DNA to RNA to protein. Next slide. The same slide in a reverse way. If you know something about the protein, and this is the causative agent for some disease process, and we are unable to find out this protein, or we want a tool better than this identification of this protein, we can go back in this ladder and go to the RNA or the DNA and find out. So that is the logic in all the diagnostic tools involving DNA and RNA. So we want to find out the problems in the function and structure of the host. So taking this route backwards, we can either go to the RNA or DNA and then try to find out the differences or the any changes that has happened in the host leading to a disease process. Next slide. So there are a few basics needed to understand the molecular diagnostics. The presumption here is sample contains many molecules of messenger RNA or DNA. And so if the sample is a pus and it is loaded with many bacteria, one particular bacteria like Staphylococci, each one will have its own genome, and so we have a lot of load of DNA and maybe also messenger RNA there. Or the other extreme situation can be the sample is so less in the pathogen, so we are unable to diagnose with the existing tools available. It may have at least one messenger RNA or a DNA. So can we make a diagnosis at this level of the sample which is given to you? That is the presumption. So how to go about when we have a situation like this? So the direct probing techniques is in situ hybridization. I am using this as a broad terminology. It can be on a sample, it can be on a tissue, it can be on an organ, it can be any different modification which is available where we see the presence of the DNA or the RNA on the system available. We don't extract that, we see the presence there itself. That is in situ hybridization. Probe hybridization following amplification. This is an important term, amplification. So my voice is heard to you through an amplifier, otherwise I am normally so low in tone. So there is a need to increase the load of DNA from maybe one or few and then make it into a appreciable load which is optimum for identifying further. So that needs amplification. Next slide. So with all this need for amplification, we have to remember a scientist, this is a book written by him, Cary Mullis, 1983. We proposed the idea of polymerase chain reaction and proved it by experimental work also. So I would like to read the sentence from his book. Beginning with a single molecule of genetic material DNA, the PCR can generate 100 billion similar molecules in an afternoon, within an afternoon in the day. The reaction is easy to execute. It requires no more than a test tube, a few simple reagents, and a source of heat. The DNA sample that one wishes to copy can be pure, or it can be a minute part of an extremely complex mixture of biological materials. So the source of material can be tissue or a plas or any other material which contains so many other biological material also, and DNA from so many different sources also. That also can be used up. The DNA may come from a hospital tissue specimen, from a single human hair, from a drop of dried blood at the scene of crime, from the tissues of mummified brain, or from a 40,000-year-old woolly mammoth frozen in a glacier. So this gives you an idea where all this technique can be adopted. So you know that one of the hardest biochemical material on earth, as we know today, is DNA. So it is not so easily destroyed, and so in any source this can be fished out, and then we can try to identify the probable etiological agent for a condition. And this may be a pitfall in some of the tests also, because of the DNA being present in dead tissue also. I will come to that later. Next slide. So another major advance for this technique to take off and then be available for diagnostic as a diagnostic tool is the identification of this and the extract of polymerase which has been done from this organism, Thermus aquaticus. So the major point here is this grows at a very high temperature. So as we all know, protein usually gets destroyed by heating up. Above 70, proteins usually are not stable and not available as enzymes to act. But this particular organism produces an enzyme, TAC polymerase. It is named as TAC polymerase because it is coming from Thermus aquaticus, a bacteria. And this polymerase can work at higher temperature, which is required for polymerase chain reaction. Next slide. There are 2-3 slides which give you a basic steps in PCR, which is cardinal in any DNA or RNA system. So I would not like to read this. I will give you a few minutes to read that, and then I will show you some animation